part of your role as a helpmate is to be the gatekeeper of your home. But if my husband and I had an argument, he would just tell me, and then I was just me thinking, aren't you going to come back and apologize? Or aren't you going to come back and draw me back in? And I was like, and then what he said to me, I'm not your dad, I'm your husband. But when you actually see me in a crisis, would you still stay?
Okay. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tutu. If you're new here, thank you so much for coming on here. And if you're not, welcome back. We're back with another episode of Things I Wish I Knew Before Marriage, but not me. I have a very, very special guest on here today, and I'm going to ask her to introduce herself.
Hello everyone, my name is Tutu Emmanuel. I've been married for 17 years. I'm a child of God, an accountant by profession, and a mother to two precious boys. 3 words that I use to describe my marriage: friendship, refining, and exciting.
So we're going to go into all the things that you wish you knew before marriage to prepare us for the stage ahead. So I want to ask about your love story, how you met your husband, and how you knew that this was the person you wanted to make your person.
How did I meet my husband? We met in church. He was actually doing a fundraising thing for Sickle cell. He was raising funds for Sickle cell, and to be honest, we have this joke between us that if I knew he was going to be my husband, I probably wouldn't approach him on the first day. Because, Pastor Agu just announced in church that there's this guy that used to DJ in clubs and all that, and he wants to use his talent for God, and he's trying to raise funds for Sickle cell. And I got so excited because you hardly hear people doing things for Sickle cell. So I walked up to him, I was like, oh wow, like, that's really good of you. And I was just talking like someone that had verbal diarrhea, asking him loads of questions. Oh, is it your sister that had sickle cell? Is it your mom? Is it your brother? Is someone in your family? Is it your girlfriend? Whatever. I just kept asking loads of questions. And I was like, anyway, if you need help, I'm always here to help you, because I was just really, really excited as to why, he was doing it, and decided to help him throughout the whole process while he was raising the fund and everything. And we've been talking from them, and like I said, the rest is history. That was how we met. Yeah.
Wow. So, okay, what was it about him that, because you could have just raised funds together and continued, but Well, we became good friends at that point in time. So we got to know each other, we became friends, and he was just a friend of mine. And the funny thing was, I always tried to matchmake with other people. Really?
Yeah. We became good friends, and I was just saying to him, you need to get married soon, and I'll try and matchmake him with people. And sometimes if he sees someone that he actually thinks he likes, he'll come to me, and I'll say, okay, let's pray about it together.
Wow.
And we'll pray about it together and everything. So the day he walked up to me and said to me, actually he didn't walk up to me, we saw in church and said, oh, I have gist for you, when you get home, call me. So I thought, oh wow, it's just because we used to talk a lot. So I got home, excited, called him. And then the next thing was, oh, I know I shouldn't be doing this, and I know this is not right, but I think I'm falling in love with you. And I was like, oh, oops. I was like, oops. And I was speechless, and I didn't know what to say. And he hung up the phone, and I was like, so I went to my sister, I was like, the weirdest thing just happened. And she was like, what? And I said, XYZ, I just kind of narrated the story to her. And this was my sister jumping all over the house, being very excited. And I knew it. You guys are two good friends not to get married. You guys are very good friends. And I was thinking, hello, yeah, my sister, you should be on my side. You should be feeling my pain. So that was it. And then we kind of just said, okay, you know what, stop. Let's go and pray about it. But we kind of agreed that even if God says no, we're going to try as much as possible for it not to affect our friendship, because we were quite good friends. And, thankfully God didn't say no. So 17 years later, we're still here.
Wow. Praise God. That's really funny, but it's also beautiful at the same time.
I mean, yeah. Because he would go on a date, he would come back, he would tell me about it. And sometimes I say to him, oh, you're being too hard, and, we just used to tease each other. He was the last person I would have thought that. But, the weirdest thing, though, is when I was single and I was praying to God for a life partner, one thing God used to say to me was that the person I was going to get married to wasn't ready, and the person was still in the club. And I had no idea. It was later I sat and I was reflecting. I was like, actually, this was things that God used to say to me then. And I remember there was this particular day, God woke me up and said, pray for him. He needs your prayer now. And I was like, pray for who? And I was just praying for him, and I was praying in the spirit. Years later, we were talking, and he was telling me about how, there was actually, before I gave my life, I used to go clubbing as well, let me confess. And then we got talking about an incident that happened. And he said, he had to go to court to be a witness for that fight. And it kind of happened around the same time that I actually got woken up at night to say, pray for him.
Wow.
And I had no idea.
Wow. So things about his life were confirming things that God had already said to you about who you were going to marry.
Yes.
My goodness.
Yes.
Your husband is not ready. He's still in the club.
Yeah. And I was like,
do you respond to that? Well, you pray.
You just keep praying. You just keep praying. So
wow. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing, Auntie. Okay, so what would be some of the things that were expectations that you had for marriage, expectations you had, and versus your reality? Yeah, so shocks and surprises.
There were a lot of shocks.
Oh, wow.
There were a lot of shocks. So I grew up as a daddy's girl. So I was very much a daddy's girl. Mm-hmm. So when I got married, I think there was they said to me, I'm not your dad, I'm your husband.
Wow.
So for me that was like a shock. And that's because when my dad was upset with me, if he tells me off for doing something wrong, I would be so down. And until my dad comes back and says to me, okay, you know what, I'm not angry with you, but I just needed you to realize that, what you did was wrong. And then he'll kind of like draw me in and make me realize that he's no longer angry with me. And that was how I grew up. My dad would, obviously he would tell me off if I've done something. He's not just going to let me get away with mother, but he would always come back later to explain why he was angry with me. And he'll probably draw me close later and everything. But if my husband and I had an argument, he would just tell me, and then this is me thinking, aren't you going to come back and apologize? Or aren't you going to come back and draw me back in? And I was like, and then when he said to me, I'm not your dad, I'm your husband. There's a difference. So for me, that was like a real shock.
That's a serious shock, because I know a lot of people say that in marriages, they say that females tend to marry people that are just like their father, or females tend to look for men that are like their father. Yes. So that must have been a very big shock.
That was a big shock.
Wow.
That was a big shock. And it was later I realized that generally men's way of saying I'm sorry is not the same way a woman says I'm sorry. So women are more vocal about their apology, while men are practical about their apology. When I say practical in terms of, so basically he will say to me, if we've had an argument, I come back and I'm having a conversation with you, that's me, I've forgotten about it, we've moved on, so let's continue. And I'm like, no, we can't continue with the conversation. I need to hear those words. And it's like, well, you'll be waiting a long time to hear those words. So
wow.
That was one of the shocker for me.
Wow.
In marriage.
Yeah. So how did you navigate that then? Like how would you advise someone that's even experiencing that sort of shock?
I would say that, after a while you will kind of get used to it. Well, not get used to it in a bad way, but at least accept that conversation to start with. Accept that, olive branch that he's stretching out in whichever way he's doing it. Maybe it is a case of just coming to have a conversation like nothing happened, or he's just volunteered to, I'm making tea, do you want a cup of tea as well or something? Accept that, and then maybe later when you see that he's a bit more calmer, you can then explain to him that, what you actually did earlier did upset me, and can we talk about it? And I don't promise that he's always going to want to talk about it, but there's always and sometimes he would talk about it. Sometimes he will still be insistent or adamant that he's right, but at least that way it kind of helped. And then after a while, I also had to grow up, so to speak, to know that it's not every single conversation that you're going to talk about. You're not going to talk about every single conversation. Some conversations, you just pick your battles, so to speak. You pick your battles.
Yeah. Pick your battles and understanding their way of responding, understanding their way of communicating.
Yes.
And not maybe comparing it to previous experiences, even with parents or in relationships.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was one of the shockers for me.
But did you have any other expectations?
Yes.
It could even be good, shocks, bad, anything.
Well, another expectation I had, to be honest, is, you know how you hear this about the man is the priest of the home, the man is the priest of the home, the man is the priest of the home. I just realized that, the man may be the priest, but the woman is the gatekeeper. So as a woman, you are the spiritual gatekeeper of your home. And I just thought, getting married meant that I left all the spiritual responsibilities to my husband. Now he's the priest of the house. He's the one in charge of everything spiritually. So I can relax and be good and all that. I can just chill and not ask for anything else and just be happy. Spiritually, he's just going to lead and all that and all that. But then I realized, no, the woman is the gatekeeper of the home. The woman is the one that has to also be spiritually sensitive. The woman also has to, yes, the man can lead the praise and worship in the home. Yes, he can lead the Bible study in the home. Yes, he can be. But as a woman, that's why God has also given you that kind of intuition. For you to know when things are not spiritually right. And you can't let your guards down just because you're married now and you think, I've got this covering and all that. Part of your role as a helpmate is to be the gatekeeper of your home. So that was another shock I realized. That I can't, just because I'm married now doesn't mean I'm spiritually, not free is not the word I'm looking for. I'm now
absolved of responsibility.
Yes, I'm not absolved of all responsibilities spiritually. I still have, in fact, I have actually a major role, more than I think I do.
Yeah,
which is not something that is not really explained to women. I didn't get anyone explaining that to me. All I heard a lot of was, the man is the priest of the home. The man is the priest of the home. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was another shock for me.
Wow. So I want to touch on how you first met.
Okay.
You mentioned that Uncle was raising funds for Sickle Cell.
Yeah.
So this episode is in September right now is Sickle Cell Awareness Month. And this episode specifically, we really wanted to touch on health in marriage, or dealing with health in marriage, dealing with illness in marriage. So I'll let Auntie speak a bit about, I guess, your journey in that and your journey in marriage.
So when you say my journey, is my journey in Sickle Cell before marriage or after?
I guess.
Or in getting married?
Yeah, so your journey towards getting married.
Okay, obviously because I was born with Sickle Cell, so I've always lived with Sickle Cell all my life. So I was very, very alert when it gets to getting married and picking the right person, because it's not something, I didn't want to bring a child into this world that would have to go through Sickle Cell as well. I mean, it was so bad that my sister used to tease me back then that if a guy starts to ask me out, the next thing I'll ask him is, what's your genotype? Before we even talk. You just have to say, hey, it's hello. And she's like, what's your genotype? And if your genotype is not AA, we're not having this conversation. So I was very, very cautious of that. But when I met my husband, again, like I said, I didn't meet him the first time he approached me, he didn't approach me from a point of view of, I like you, I want to date you and everything. So we were friends. So that was not even a conversation that was in our radar when we became friends.
Okay. Because
we were just friends. Like I said, I used to try and matchmaking with other people. So the whole genotype thing was not an issue.
Yeah.
And then, again, like I always say, I don't advise anybody to do this, but one thing I used to do, which was really stupid thinking about it now, is if a guy was asking me out, I would actually pray to go into a crisis. Because it's okay for you to say, yeah, don't worry, it's fine. I still love you. But when you actually see me in a crisis, would you still stay?
Wow.
Because I've dated guys who would say to you, oh, no, what's a big deal? No, I really love you. Love conquers all things. And then the first major crisis you have, some of them are bold enough to say, you know what, I thought I can handle this, but I can't. And they leave. Others find an excuse. And the next, you just have like a little argument over something as simple as, oh, you said you were going to get here at 3 o'clock, you got here at 3:05. What? And then the whole argument escalates and you're thinking, please, what are we arguing about? And before you know it, I'm not interested anymore. It's later you then realize that it was just an excuse to break up because they couldn't handle sickle cell. So even again with him, because I didn't see him as a potential, I didn't pray about that at that point in time.
Okay.
However, I actually had a few crises.
In the time you were friends?
In the time we were friends, and he was there, and he still remained friends. For me, I just thought, well, we're not going out anywhere, we're not dating anyway, so it's easy for him to remain as friends. So when things started getting serious and he was asking me out, and I said, look, bruv, I know you've raised funds for sickle cell, but you've seen me at my worst. Are you sure you want to do this? And he was like, oh, that he's prayed about it, he's heard God, he knows that God is saying this is what he needs to do. I was like, don't be Abraham that said, God is the woman that you gave me. Be sure you want to do this. But he was so adamant. And at this point in time, I hadn't asked him what his genotype was. So I asked him what his genotype was, and he refused to tell me. He said, I'm not telling you. Wow. He said, because it doesn't matter what my genotype is. I know what God has said to me. So I don't care what my genotype is. I was like, you don't understand. What if you have a child that turns out to be SS? He was like, we're not going to have a child that turns out to be SS. I know what God has told me, and I do not want anything to shake my faith. So I'm not doing any test. I was like, no, you don't understand. So eventually, to shut me up, he bought this kit. He said he could do a test at home by himself. So he said to me, oh, well, don't worry, I've done the test, I'm fine. I'm not. I was like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, I'm sure. Don't worry about it. But then we're friends. So I thought, okay, you know what? But he was like, I know what God has said, and I'm going by what God has said. And that was how it was. Obviously, I eventually found out what his genotype was when I was pregnant with my son, because I've got sickle cell, he had to now do a proper test in the hospital. So then he didn't have a choice. He couldn't argue with the doctors at that point in time. So I eventually found out what his genotype was. But before then, he was so adamant, saying he knows what God has said. Even if he turns out that he's SS and never knew all his life, he was still going to go ahead with it. So
that's beautiful.
So that's dealing with sickle. That was before.
Yeah. Before you go into the marriage part of, is that what you're about to say?
Yeah, yes.
What was your process like trusting God for someone with having sickle cell? Because you said that the first thing you'd ask is their genotype, or you'd ask for a crisis. What was your process in terms of trusting God for someone?
Well, to be honest, when I gave my life to Christ, I was born into a Muslim, for a bit of background. I was born into a Muslim family. Mm-hmm. So I grew up as a Muslim, even though I would not say I was a practicing Muslim, even though my parents tried to make me one. But I had so many questions. So even, you get this Arabic teacher that comes to teach you Arabic and all that. I think I ended up frustrating the guy than the guy spent time teaching me, because I would always ask questions like, so this God that created the whole earth can only speak one language, and until I learn Arabic, I can't talk to him, kind of thing. So after a while, I just thought, I'm done with this whole Muslim thing. It's not working. Mm. So at some point, I was neither a Muslim or Christian, but I knew that there was God, and I believed in God. Mm. And then eventually I gave my life to Christ. But the first thing I said to God was, this whole sickle cell thing hurts. Mm. And it's really painful, but I'm trusting you. I've heard everyone say you're such a good God, I'll give my life to you, but can we do a deal? As in, every time this crisis comes, can it not be as painful as it is? And ended up giving my life to Christ. And, I think I had peace when God led me to the verse in the Bible when a man was born blind, and the disciples asked God, who sinned? Was it his father, his mother, or the guy that was born blind, that he was born blind? And God said, nobody. He was born blind so that God's maybe glorified.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, wow. So sometimes I'm that special. God made me the way I am. Just like so he might be glorified.
Yeah.
And then the scripture in the Bible says before I formed you in your mother's womb. There's a particular scripture that says before I knitted you in your mother's womb. And because I used to knit as a child, that kind of made so much sense to me, because I could just picture knitting. And I think the Holy Spirit used that to talk to me, that you don't knit and then decide what you're knitting. You first of all decide what you're knitting before you start to knit. So if you were going to knit a jumper or a scarf, you're about to knit a jumper or a scarf. You don't just start knitting and then halfway decide that, I think I'm going to knit a jumper, or I think I'm going to knit a scarf. Even if you're knitting a jumper, you decide, is it going to be one with just one button at the top, or is it going to have 3 buttons? Because all this information will
inform even the
way you knit
it.
You put the colors you put together, where you put the buttons and everything. So I already knew you before I started to form you. I was intentional when I took the S gene from your dad and the S gene from your mom. I didn't make a mistake. I was very intentional in doing that. So I was like, okay, fine. I agree. I accept. But then you've got to choose the right person for me as well. So that kind of informed my decision in everything. So not just in getting married, in everything. So ever since then, that has informed everything I do, even my purpose. Everything I do is about God. If you were intentional about this, then I need to know what else is going on. I need to know this, I need to know this, I need to know this. You need to help me with this.
Okay. So that already informed. So you had a level of trust in terms of,
yes,
if you were intentional in allowing this, then you're intentional in the person that you're going to
get married to. I was intentional about having children.
That's
I was
beautiful.
intentional about, even times after that when I've been ill, I've been saying to, and even when the doctors come up with whatever they're coming up with, then I'm saying to God, no, it's not complete. The vision is not complete. The assignment is not complete. So regardless of what they're saying, it's not, you're not done with me yet. So it doesn't matter what they're saying. Until you tell me you're done with me, then but you're not done with me yet. So there's still so much to do.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. So I guess that will also be encouragement to any single young lady or single lady.
Yes, any single lady that out there suffering from, and it might not be sickle cell, it could be anything else. I know some people think, oh, I'm too tall, or I'm too fat, or I'm too skinny, or I have a speech impediment, or whatever it is. God was intentional when he formed you. Because he said, before I formed you, before I knitted you. And maybe sometimes we need to go back and watch videos of people knitting things for you to get that picture. God knitted you in your mother's womb. God was intentional when he was knitting you. He knew what he was knitting. Except we want to say that God made a mistake. And God does not make mistakes.
Wow. That's so beautiful. Wow. Thank you for sharing, Auntie.
No worries.
Do you want to share as well about sickle cell in marriage then? So,
sickle cell in marriage, again, I guess with the level of trust I've had in God, so even sickle cell in marriage, my husband knew what he was getting into, so it wasn't a shock for him.
Okay.
So he knew what he was getting into. Having said that, though, I guess I did myself also a bit of a disservice.
Why?
And I say disservice in the sense that I can be a bit of a macho woman. And when I say macho woman, in the sense that I don't let, I want to do everything. I don't want to be seen as as someone that is helpless or a vegetable. So sometimes I'm like cleaning, doing all these kind of things that sometimes I get tired, or sometimes I know I'm pushing the boundaries. So I realized that sometimes my husband takes a back seat. And then when I say to him, you're not even being helpful, you're not doing this, he says, do you realize that you don't make it easy for me to help you? Because you do it so much that it's so easy to forget that you've got sickle cell. Because if there's something that needs to be done, you're just on the ball, so you make it's very, very easy for me to forget. Because you're not want to be just helpless and throw yourself. So Hannah had to be a bit more intentional.
Of taking rest,
yes. I had to be more intentional of taking rest. So now he knows, and he knows, my son knows that if I say to them, this Saturday, I'm not doing anything. But before I get to that point, sometimes I know that there's food in the house. So I've made this food. If you like it, fine. If you don't, feel free to do takeaway. But today, I'm not leaving this bed. I just want to rest. So I now became more intentional about taking rest, because I just automatically thought that, he knows he should know, he knows I have sickle cell anyway, so he should be more helpful.
Proactive.
And I think, yes, it should be more. But I then can be such and I guess it's not just sickle cell. I guess a lot of women, we find ourselves in that position. Not just sickle cell, you think, I'm the woman of the house. I should do the cooking. I should do the cleaning. I should do the school run. I should take the child to school. I should make sure I do the child's homework. And we don't get the men involved. And we do it so much so that then we now get tired, and then we now become resentful because we think, you're not helping me. But you've always done it, and you've never. So I realized that when I then started saying to him, I can't do this. You've got to help me with this. Or I would then turn around and say things like school run. For years, I did the school run myself. I'll do the drop off, I'll do pick up, I'll do pick up myself. And I did that myself for years, obviously. And then, because I took some time off to raise my son, it was okay during that period when I took time off.
Yeah.
But by the time I went back to work, he got so used to me doing the school run back and forth that it was just okay with him. Until I think it was 2 years ago, I said to him, we can't continue doing this. I'm getting tired. I've got things I want to do as well. Because I went back to work in 2019. And even then I was still doing both ends, trying to shuffle both ends, and I was getting exhausted. But initially I was saying, but he didn't get it. And then later I said to him, you know what? Pick one. I'm flexible. Which is easier for you? Do you want to do drop off in the morning and I'll do pick up in the afternoon? Or do you want me to do drop off in the morning and you do pick up in the afternoon? But you've got to pick one. And that was when he said, okay. He usually has meetings in the mornings. He would rather do the pick up in the afternoon, which worked well for me anyway, because I don't like driving when it's dark. So it saves me driving when it's dark at night, especially during winter time. Yeah. But up until then, I was, again, macho.
Taking it all on.
Which I guess a lot of women, we do. Even without sickle cell, even strong, healthy women, we forget that. But then you forget there's only so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
And there's only so many things you can do. And you need to tell that man that you do need help. Otherwise, you've got it.
Wow. So it's being more vocal.
More vocal, yes.
Being more vocal. And because you mentioned something and you were saying that you wish that Uncle would be like, almost like he just knew to do it or be proactive, but also remembering that your partner can't read your mind or can't feel what you're feeling.
Yes.
So even if this is separate to sickle cell, just in general.
Yeah, just in general.
Being more vocal.
Yes.
Those are things that you wish kind of you
prepared for
along the way.
Exactly.
Asking for the help and not assuming that they know you need help.
Yeah, because a lot of women would just assume that, oh, it's the woman's job to raise a child, to cook in the house, to clean, make sure the house is always clean. It's just the woman's job to do all that, and no one is saying it's not the woman's job, but if you're not vocal to let your partner know, I'm drowning, I'm tired, even if he doesn't do the cleaning, for instance, you guys can sit down and talk about it. Do we need a cleaner now? How are we going to pay the cleaner? How many hours is the cleaner going to do? At least you can have a conversation about it. You can say things like, okay, I think I need an au pair. I can't do this. But you can't just sit down there and assume that they're going to know.
So opening that space for conversation.
Yes.
For it to be. That's really good. So upon reflecting on 17 years of marriage, and 17 years in health as well, by God's grace, what would be your advice to newly wedded couples? Because there are some people on here that aren't single, they are married. I know this is things I wish I knew, but what would be your advice to people that are in that new stage of marriage to navigate?
Enjoy every season. Enjoy every season of your marriage, and try as much as possible to build memories together. And when I say enjoy every season, because for some people, they get married and they have a child almost immediately. And it almost seems like, oh, I wish I had enjoyed myself for a few years before this child comes. It's almost like I've just, 1 minute I'm single, next minute I'm a mother because I got pregnant on my wedding night, and you feel, oh, this child. But that child is going to go. 18 years comes really quickly.
Really?
You think 18 years is like, oh, wow. My son is going to be 15 in November, and I was thinking, how? How did we get to 15? Again, if it's a case of you're married and you're still waiting on God and the child hasn't come, enjoy it. Enjoy that season, because the child will come, and then again, it's going to be a case of diaper changing, sleepless nights, school runs and stuff like that. And so that is what I would say. Enjoy every season. Build memories in every season, because again, the memories you build, and be friends. Be friends, because when it's all said and done, all that is going to be left is friendship. And when the children leave home, because they will eventually leave home, they'll leave at 18 to go off to uni. If they get a job where their university town is and you don't live in their university town, they're not going to come back home. And even if they do come back home, they come back home for a few years, they get married, they go and start their life. And even if they're home, whilst they're at home, by the time they're 18, 21, you can't police them. You can't be asking them, why are you going? At that point, you're just expecting them to be responsible. If you're not going to come home tonight, make sure you tell me. If it's too late, let me know where you are. You can't, but that's so you're just expecting some form of responsibility and accountability at that age. You're not exactly expecting you can't stop them from going out. You can't stop them from going on holidays with their friends. So it's back to the two of you again. So it's the friendship you build that is going to carry you through those times.
That's beautiful, Auntie. And then lastly, I want you to please speak to the camera and encourage. I really feel for you to speak to any single lady currently waiting on marriage, but is also speaking to sickle cell, and if that's a worry, and in the same breath, maybe women that are married in sickle cell and worried about their child having sickle cell, your encouragement to them.
So, for that young girl out there waiting on God, asking God when, looking at yourself and saying to yourself, always a bridesmaid, never a bride. I got married at 32. So, actually, no, I got married at 31, not 32. I had my son at 32. I got married at 31. You're special. You're beautiful. being married is just one of the many things you've been called to be in life. There's more to you than MRS. There's more to you than being a Mrs. You've got a purpose. You've got a vision. You've got something that God has called you to be. Be that thing. Because if you spend all your time waiting on marriage and holding yourself back and not doing those things that you're going to do, you're depriving the world of who you are. So enjoy it. Enjoy that season. Enjoy who you've been called to be. Because beyond being an MRS, you're probably the professor of some university. You're probably the chief accountant of some company. You're probably the NGO leader in some organization somewhere. Those are things that are beyond being a Mrs.
That's good.
And you have time to travel the world. Trust me. Being married comes with its own accountability as well. It's nice. It's lovely being married. But right now, as a single girl, you can decide that, you know what? I won't spend the next 2 weeks on holiday. You don't have to think about anybody else. So enjoy it. Enjoy this season. And to that young girl that thinks that because of sickle cell I'm not married, that is a lie from the pits of hell. You are beautiful. And the guy that you are meant to be with will come at the right time. And for the newlyweds, you've just found out that you're AS and your husband is AS and you guys are carrying a baby. You probably just haven't had a baby and you've just been told that child is sickle cell. Psst.
Yeah.
Psst. That child is sickle cell. So that child is a loving addition to your family. That child is a blessing to you. That child is going to go beyond places. Speak life into that child. Allow that child to be who they are meant to be. Yes, let them take risk, but within reason. As they grow older, they will know their limits. They will know their triggers. Help them with their triggers, but do not stop them from being who they are. And always tell them they're not less of who they are. They are beautiful. They are fearfully and wonderfully made. And they're very important in God's kingdom.
Amen. That's so I've used the word beautiful like 5 million times in this video, but genuinely that was so beautiful, and I hope and I really believe that this episode is healing. It's really healing for many people. So God bless you for sharing your story. Thank you once again, Auntie.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. And yeah.
Did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, nothing else apart from, like I said, love yourselves, love God, follow God.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I definitely enjoyed. And this episode was just healing. That's the word I'm going to use. Please share this far and wide, genuinely, to anyone that you think may be blessed, will be blessed by this. Thank you so much. Make sure you guys subscribe so you know when we have another episode out. And I want to say a special thank you once again to Auntie Tutu. God bless you.
Thank you, Dotun.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.